And now for our talk on Divergent. I'd like to introduce Sarah Schlafly. Sarah is the CEO of Mighty Cricket, a next-generation protein company with a mission to build a clean protein supply to sustain the world. After receiving an accounting degree from Truman State University, Sarah made a career in food. She built a nutrition and cooking school in North Carolina, where she worked with both Fortune 100 companies and families at the poverty line. In 2014, Sarah was awarded Inc. magazine's Military Entrepreneur. Upon entering the corporate world, Sarah was the digital marketing manager for a national food brand. She now runs Mighty Cricket full-time and travels internationally to share her passion for more sustainable food systems. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. This theme this month is really fun. I am curious. I like to make my presentations as collaborative as possible. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to either pop in the chat box, or you could even just unmute yourself and jump in and have a question or have a comment. Has anyone's morning diverged from your hopes or expectations?
Yeah, I think Matt says yes as well.
Oh, no.
Oh, he lost his voice.
Lost his voice.
Yeah, so we audibled this morning.
Wow. Bit. That's not great. Yeah, I woke up and my daughter she came in my room and she was just like banging stuff in my bedroom. It was not the morning that I was expecting. So it struck me as humorous as getting ready for my presentation today. I'm like, that was very different than what I expected. So as I share my divergent story, I ask you to think about ways that you have intentionally diverged and whether or not it was worth it to you. And then at the end, maybe we can share stories and have more of a discussion on that. So I broke my presentation today into two parts. The first is just sharing my own thoughts about the term divergent. And then the second part is going into my divergent story. The definition of divergent is moving in different directions from a common point. And what really stuck out to me about this definition was that second half, from a common point. And I thought, if people start out in the same place, what compels them to go a completely different direction from the norm? And I thought about in the US, we actually have a culture and economic incentive to be divergent. So the US Patent and Trade Office, the US Patent and Trademark Office, we have economic advantages for doing things differently and being the first to do things differently. In fact, when you get a trademark, that's it works retrospectively. And also our culture is just one that really promotes and celebrates standing up and standing out and being different. So much so that when I went to Asia and I spent one summer backpacking in Asia, I was touring different co-working spaces in Tokyo and Malaysia because I love the co-working spaces here in St. Louis. And so I thought I'd check out those places. And the one thing the common theme I was hearing from my travels is that the hardest thing for them to do in these co-working spaces is to get people to collaborate and then voice their differences. And I think that's something that here in the US we do very well compared to other countries. We still have a long way to go for, having total acceptance of differences of an opinion. But as a whole, we are a little bit more progressed in this area than in some other countries. And there are both pros and cons to our culture of divergence. The pros are that we have had amazing innovations come out of the US, unlike any other country. So we've had the light bulb and the electricity. We've had the computer. We were the first to go to the moon, the motor vehicle, all of these incredible innovations from that's resulted in our culture of doing things differently and having that courage and that freedom to go out on a limb and try something new. The cons are that sometimes having all of these people diverging in different directions can lead to chaos. And when there's a big existential threat, such as COVID, it can result in a lack of coordination. And sometimes we can negate each other on our efforts. And so when it comes to being divergent, I thought about how important it is to really think about my skill set and when I should diverge and when I should be a follower. Because in order to be a leader, we need 100 followers, right? If everyone was a leader, then we wouldn't get anywhere. So I thought about the areas in my life where I've decided to diverge from the norms, the standards, were areas where I felt I had the greatest expertise in, not necessarily compared to, the rest of the experts in that field, but just my own strengths as a person. I've used those to do things differently. So I'll get into my story, and maybe it'll that will be more evident as to what I'm alluding to. But basically, I was thinking, while Divergence is celebrated in the U.S. and it's easier to do it here than in other countries, it's still a really difficult road, and it's not to be taken lightly. My divergence story starts when I was a child. So I grew up with this story about my grandparents, and my great grandparents owned a bakery. And during the Great Depression, at the end of the day, they would use the leftovers of their bakery to feed people who could not buy food. And this was a really inspiring story to me. Since I was about 9 years old, I always wanted to be a food entrepreneur. And in college, I started studying accounting, and I tried to go down the accounting road. And I just came back to food after graduating, and it's really a passion of mine. And that story really inspired me to do something that would be able to truly feed the world. And especially when there's a crisis, I wanted to be in a position to do that. So that's where my divergent story started. And now I'm going to do a screen share. Okay. Let's see how to do this. All right. I'm working with two different tools here, screen share. Do you guys see the full slide, or do you see like a partial slide?
I think we see the full screen.
Full screen. Okay, perfect. So I diverged when it comes to food pretty hard. I started at the same point as every other American, fearing the idea of eating insects. It sounds disgusting. But I decided to go on this really wacky road into a completely different food source. And I'm feeling pretty good about it. And really, what compelled me to do this was truly the idea of needing an alternative food source that could sustain the world. And this is what alarmed me so much about where the food industry is heading. So when I graduated college, I started getting into the food scene, doing nutrition cooking classes, and I also was reading more and more about sustainability and how food and sustainability are tied together. And I learned that pretty soon, in just 30 years, we are heading to a point where we're going to run out of enough resources to feed the world. So we're right here at about over 7.5 billion people on the planet. And in 2050, we're projected at 9.5 billion people on the planet. So it's just this exponential growth has resulted in a significant strain on our food system. And look at this, like for the longest time, human population has been growing at such a slow pace. And all of a sudden, the innovations of the Industrial Revolution just enabled us to skyrocket. It's really alarming when you look at this graph and realize, wow, that is a huge difference. So one of the most alarming statistics to me is that in the past 40 years, the Earth has lost a third of its arable land. So a third of its ability to grow food is what that means. And this pace hasn't slowed, which means we're on track in 80 years to not have any more food, any more land where we can produce food. So our current food system, if we keep down this trend, it's just going to result in us not having food for the future. And so as being a member of the food industry, I realized that, I can either contribute to this problem or I could break away and come up with a different solution. Right now, a quarter of our world's population is facing extremely high water stress, and we have a big chunk of our water is going towards food production. And then, of course, we hear a lot about how carbon greenhouse gases are affecting the planet, and livestock is a huge portion of the contributions to carbon greenhouse gases, about an estimate around 15%. So I thought when I was in my 20s, I was like, this is a huge problem. Someone needs to solve it. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, man, who's going to solve this problem? And the answer kept coming back to me. Like, I have to be part of the solution. I can't expect anyone else to be a part of the solution. And this was a pretty big realization for me, because when you're in your teens and early 20s, you look to other people to be the leaders of the world, I think. And then there's this turning point as I aged into my 30s. It's like, okay, actually, it's my generation now that has to solve a bunch of these problems. And I didn't feel entirely equipped to do this, but I knew that my skill sets of having a culinary background, and I had a food marketing background, I realized that my skill sets were as pretty good as you can get for working on this issue. And so that's when I decided to jump into something different. And it was at this crux where I realized that the risk of not doing anything is greater now than the risk of doing something and it failing. Because in 30 years, when we have reached this global food crisis, I want to be the one to be able to feed those who are hungry. And in fact, I want to prevent that from ever happening. So now 30 years prior to that point is the perfect time to start working on this issue. Just like my grandparents, my great-grandparents didn't pop up a bakery overnight. They already had it ready by the time the Great Depression hit. So that was rolling through my brain when I decided to start an edible insects company. So I delved into edible insects, but I am not really, in fact, the first person to do this. 2 billion people around the world have already discovered this as a food source. It's just not popular in the US. So in Mexico, grasshoppers, they call them chapulines, are really popular. In Scandinavia, mealworms are becoming very much in African countries. They eat some ants, and in Thailand, the cricket is really big in Thailand. I've also had beehive in Cambodia. And so I chose the humble, the lowly cricket because it is just so incredibly resource, what's the word? It's really efficient, resource efficient at producing protein. And protein is one of the nutrients, it's the most taxing to our environment, that nutrient. So cricket, for 1 pound of protein, requires 1,800 times fewer gallons of water compared to beef, a pound of beef. It requires 12 times less feed and emits 100 times fewer carbon greenhouse gases. And then my cricket protein powder has, in one serving, it's got 10 grams of protein. It has 100% of your daily value vitamin B12. And it's also really low in saturated fat. You don't use growth hormones. You don't use fertilizers. They can be grown in an urban setting, which means that all of a sudden we can have these city centers that has a hyper local protein source, which is not something that we can get today because protein right now requires large space for cows or for soy. So in the future, cities of the future could have whole cricket farms in downtown St. Louis, turning one of those abandoned buildings into protein production. So now is a fun, this game is a fun way to break up me just talking at you for 30 minutes. And it's a Jeopardy game of historical food stigmas. So I have a series of questions, and you can just type your answer into the chat box, I suppose, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so the first question is, this group of vegetables was taboo to eat in Europe before the 1800s. It was associated with poison and witchcraft. It's a group of vegetables.
Someone said tomatoes. A couple people did.
We have some smart people in the crowd. I believe tomatoes, are they considered a nightshade vegetable?
I think so.
I'm gonna have to Google that real quick. Are tomatoes a nightshade vegetable? I've always known of like bell peppers, and yeah, tomatoes are. So eggplants, bell peppers, and tomatoes are all considered nightshade vegetables. And I was reading up on why this is, and apparently they made some sort of poison with like the skins of these vegetables. They cooked it up in a way that was highly potent, and so it grew stigmatized as a result of it. And then slowly over the centuries, centuries. This one took a really long time to normalize. Very interesting. In the 1600s in New England, So New York, Boston area, it was considered cruel and unusual punishment to feed this meat to prisoners on a daily basis.
Lobster.
All right, our answer, lobster. They called lobsters water bugs. And when you look at it, it actually really looks kind of gross. But we played it whole, which is crazy to me. Why do we have like the antennas and the eyes and the legs on the lobster and we look at it and it's like considered this gourmet food when it looks disgusting? So I always thought it would be a really fun campaign to have a lobster, you know, all plated, looking delicious and steamy, and then do the same thing with a little cricket and plate it the exact same way as a lobster, and then do like a side-by-side photo comparison. So like say, you know, look how perceptions just are, it's all about how you look at it, something like that. But I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. Okay, before 1977, this fish was known as the Antarctic toothfish. Fishermen tossed this cod back into the ocean. No one wanted it. The answer was Chilean sea bass. And so they totally renamed it from a cod to a bass, which apparently sounds better. And then it was either a fisherman or a chef who just renamed the fish. And all of a sudden they were able to sell in the US. And you can sell it now for like $30 a plate. And this is my last one. Before the 1960s, this cuisine could not be found in the US. Today, there are nearly 4,000 restaurants in the US thanks to a handful of innovative chefs in California. All right. 3, 2, 1. Sushi. So I looked at these 4 examples of food taboos and how they went mainstream. The nightshade vegetable scare was just, it went mainstream through migration. I believe the story was people from Italy were using tomatoes and they migrated somewhere and it slowly started catching on just through that mix of cultures. The second one, the lobster, started out in Boston, of course, and New York, and nobody wanted it there. The lobster would just pile up and they were huge. And so when people started moving into the Midwest, they would just sell it to the trains. And the trains would serve it on their journeys as this exotic food from the East Coast. And Midwesterners would eat this and be like, oh, this tastes like chicken. This is really good flavor. And soon it became like this coveted, delicious, exotic food from the East. And then the scarcity then started driving up the cost of lobster. And now we view it as this high-end premium food when it's basically a giant water bug on a plate. Oh, whoops. How do I go back? So the Chilean sea bass, as I said, that was just a rename. And then the sushi was given a makeover, and they took it to Hollywood, and the Hollywood stars made it famous. But the makeover was that traditionally the nori, the wrapper, is on the outside, and the inside is stuffed with raw seafood, and it's very exotic. So these chefs in Hollywood, or these chefs in California, decided to put the rice on the outside. So they inverted that, and then they stuffed it with like cream cheese and avocado, and we got the California roll. And it was that California roll that the Hollywood stars really liked, and then it became popular. And now in my college town of Kirksville, Missouri, you can find a sushi place in like rural Missouri. Is pretty crazy. So I thought a good way to get people to consume insects and to really diverge from what's mainstream here in the US is to use other cultures who have migrated here to popularize it, give it a rename. So this right here is a picture of mealworms. Mealworms is a disgusting name. I do not want to eat a mealworm, but I tried it and it tastes so good. You can't even tell it's a bug. It just tastes like this like crispy extruded cereal thing. So there's one woman who's trying to rename it Molitos, which is their Italian, or not their Italian, their Latin name. And I thought, ooh, that is a really good name. So maybe there could be a different name for cricket, something like that. But just renaming it something else goes really far when it comes to food. Now, Mighty Cricket really focuses on remaking our food. So to get people to try something different, a good way to do that is disguise it in this exact same thing that people are already trying. So this delicious smoothie, you would have no idea that it's got about 100 crickets in it. It just looks like an ordinary smoothie. And then finally, we can get social influencers to make this extreme idea go mainstream. And it's already happening. In the beginning of the Avengers movie, they talk about going out to a restaurant and eating some bugs. So that was really exciting for me as a bug person. So Mighty Cricket products, this is really old packaging. This is our very first MVP product. But we focus on just making our products extremely approachable to the American palate and taking the cricket and milling it down in a fine powder so you can't see it, and then blending it undetected into delicious comfort foods that you're already used to eating, like pancakes, waffles, and oatmeal. And the goal is to, like I said, in 30 years, be able to sustain the world. So I thought about, where the food industry is headed. And for me, it was fairly easy to decide to make that point, to just go completely left field on it. That's market strategy. These slides don't really apply. This one was interesting though. I'll share it anyway. In October 2019, I ran the St. Louis Cricket Challenge. I don't know if anyone saw it in the news, but we were able to get 50 different restaurants in here to feature a dish made with Mighty Cricket powder. So we had pizza and soup and cupcakes. It was really fun and to see all of the different innovations that were coming out of these restaurants. And we got thousands of St. Louisans to try something that they've never tried before. And like I said, the key is just making it as comfortable for people to diverge as possible. So it doesn't really feel like you're doing anything different, even if you are. This really showcases that one person can make a mighty impact, and our brand is all about being small but mighty. It's kind of the symbol of the cricket. It's such a small, lowly bug, but it can make a mighty impact on the world. And I never really wanted to be known as the St. Louis Bug Lady, which is not a title that I really have embraced. But you know, there is great power in being the only person in St. Louis who's manufacturing products with insects, because all of a sudden you draw a lot of attention and you can make a big splash. Oh, what I was going to say about that was that I decided I need to choose this carefully, what I'm going to draw attention to, because anything that I'm drawing attention to, that means I'm detracting attention from something else. And there are a lot of great organizations and causes, especially in St. Louis, that people need to pay attention to. So if I'm creating commotion and drawing attention, it means that I'm detracting it from other things. So it just, to me, it has to be something that's really worth it, rather than just making noise for the sake of being the center of attention. I really want to divert it to a cause that I find really meaningful. Okay, let's see. I have a few more minutes before Q&A. So I think I'll knock out just a few common questions that I get first, and then we can talk more about divergence, and maybe you have your own stories to share. Where do my crickets come from? They come from cricket farms. Yes, there are cricket farms. And the best cricket farms tend to be in Thailand. So right now my crickets come from Thailand, and I ship them cargo so that it's not as taxing to the environment. How are they harvested? Crickets are chilled, which puts them in this wonderful hibernative state called torpor. And so they kind of go to sleep, and then after freezing them for a full 24 hours, they're fully dead, which is what happens in nature. They perish in the cold, and then their eggs carry over to the spring. How many crickets are in your products? One bowl of Mighty Cricket oatmeal will have about 60 crickets in it, but you will never know. So don't think about that aspect. In fact, all of your food has crickets in it. Anything that's processed, so tomato sauce, flour has tons of bugs in it, peanut butter, chocolate. Yeah, anytime like you harvest wheat, you're not sifting through all the bugs. You just harvest all the bugs with it, and it's really nutritious. It makes the flour more higher in protein and higher in prebiotics and all of these amazing nutrients that bugs carry. What do crickets taste like? They taste nutty, pistachio, sesame, hints of chocolate, or what my chefs pick up on. Do crickets trigger any allergens? Yes, their exoskeleton is chitin, which is the same as lobster and shrimp. So if you have a shellfish allergen, I would recommend avoiding all insects. Where can I try them? I sell my products online at mightycricket.co and on Amazon, and in a couple of local stores in St. Louis, like Local Harvest, and I'm starting to push into bigger retailers.
So we've got a handful of questions that have already started populating. So I'll call on some people to let them ask some of those. Sarah, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Let's start with Lori. Do you want to unmute?
Sure. I was just curious, after that challenge that you did, do any local restaurants still have any of those items still on their menu?
Oh, this was the sad thing is most, I would say 50% of those restaurants closed after COVID. And then the others pared down their menus to like bare bones. Like I was going to do it every year, right? Starting in 2019. And then I was already ramping up in 2020 before COVID hit. And then it just didn't work out. So yeah, unfortunately, I was making really great headway with the restaurants, and now it's like they're not in great shape at all.
Okay. Well,
All
hoping
right.
for a comeback.
How about Matt? Do you want to unmute? I guess I should be specific. Matt, we'll start with Matt Ship.
Okay. Well, I was just, well, the first one I had was basically, you just, marketing is how many bugs do we unknowingly eat per day anyway? And I'm sure it's a couple.
Oh yeah, it's probably more than 2.
Yeah.
I heard that thyme is a really dirty herb.
Even,
It
yeah.
attracts a lot of bugs. Now that I've worked in the bug industry, I don't view bugs as dirty anymore. It's funny how we have that association with our food. But yeah, we're eating so many bugs every day and we don't even know it.
Yeah. And what are the crickets based diet? Because I was kind of curious if it's like you could use basically throw away plant waste from a harvest or something. They just make that
Yeah.
more of a circular economy.
Yeah, you can use pre-consumer waste
Mm-hmm.
to safely feed. Now, if you're breeding crickets at home, you could use your post-consumer waste scraps.
Mm-hmm.
But crickets will eat anything. They'll even eat each other. So you have to be really careful to keep them happy. Otherwise, they'll start like mutilating each other.
Lovely.
And the diet on my plant or on my farm, they get cassava and they have some corn and some wheat and things like that.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
And then let's go to Matt W. I think he was shocked by the fact that you talked about 60 crickets in a bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable because the actual amount that once it becomes cricket ash, once they're roasted and milled down in a fine powder, 60 crickets can just like fit in a really small mound. You're like, wow, that seemed crazy. But you can grow 1,000 crickets per cubic foot about every 8 weeks.
So just out of curiosity, from kind of a marketing standpoint, you talked about renaming and rebranding and how to push some of this stuff out to the public. Have you ever thought, and some people might view it as kind of concealing or camouflaging, but have you ever thought about producing a protein powder that's not so insect forward in how it's sold? Like not necessarily pushing the brand name as something with an insect in the terminology, but selling it more as a sustainable source of protein powder that
Yeah, totally.
use insects.
Totally. So I kind of I've discovered that my products very much hide the cricket in plain sight. So I'll do a screen share of my packaging. This is what my protein powder packaging looks like. It has clean protein in big, huge letters.
Yeah.
And the Mighty Cricket brand name is just up above here.
Gotcha.
And I didn't like, I wanted to not be so bug forward, but cricket is in the brand name. So it's very obvious. But what I've discovered is that a lot of people, when they first see the brand, view a cricket as a symbol and not literal.
Well, then I was curious because Blue Bunny, I mean, ice cream doesn't come with rabbit in it. So there's a lot of like,
yeah. So it becomes this thing where I can be very upfront and obvious about it without actually being obvious.
Okay.
Because I've had people who tried my products, liked it, told other people about it, and then later discovered that I meant cricket literal and they were like mortified.
Gotcha.
I'm like, what did you think I meant? So yeah, that's turned out to be kind of an asset. And I've done a lot of A/B testing on different brand names. And the one that always wins is Mighty Cricket. There's something about that name that people like, and I really love it too, so I'm happy. But I think that the other reason why I chose to have cricket in the name is because I wanted to have a friendly face to this fear. And crickets can be, really easily personified. So my new logo is of a cartoony cricket, and he looks so cute and friendly. And we think of it as kind of like Jiminy Cricket, gives you those warm fuzzies.
Mr. Kirchhoff, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hey, good morning. I was just wondering if you foresee a point in your business in the future where you can bring the farming aspect of the production to a local.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. And at one point I, pre-COVID, we had a cricket farm here in Fenton, Missouri. And I wanted to work closely with them, and then one day all become one entity, but they closed down. So now I'm trying to I'm just on the lookout for opportunities for another cricket farmer who wants to take the lead on that project. And then I can help out with that. I'd be a little bit too strained to try and get that up and running and get the brand up and running. So I'm just keeping my eyes peeled for the right opportunity to go in with someone on that.
And Alexandra?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm not doing video, but I have my little daughter here with me. Yeah, I was curious from a marketing standpoint, how you work to overcome the challenge of marketing crickets to the public.
The biggest thing is making the food visually appealing. So people comment a lot about this image I have on my website. I'll share it. This one. They really like that. And all of a sudden they forget that this is a cricket waffle and they just look at delicious food. So that's really what I do to market it, is really minimize the cricket. Maybe just do the logo, not even the brand name. In my, here's the little logo up here. That's too small to see. Anyway, you can check out the logo on my social media profiles. But I try to do that. And then also I play up the small but mighty theme. So talking about stories of how people do really small acts that make a mighty impact. And we talk about that all the time and make it very much also geared towards outdoor enthusiasts. I found is one of my biggest markets. So people who are into climbing and backpacking and hiking and already are in touch with nature. And it's just another way that they can extend their passion for preserving the environment. So that whole key for it being highly sustainable really hits home with a small but growing percentage of Americans. I think about 14% of Americans right now make purchasing decisions based on the environment.
Matt, do you want to kind of compound on that? I think it slides into what she was just saying, but about the cooking videos.
Sure. Yeah, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while, and I've seen a couple of your cooking videos you've done, and it kind of made it like, okay, well, it's just the powder I'm cooking with, like I would with flour and thing. Are there any other strategies you're using to kind of like, hey, look, it's not bugs, or it is bugs, but it's not buggy. Other ways to kind of get the public to like, oh, okay, it's just another ingredient.
Well, one of the things I do when I talk about Mighty Cricket protein powder is I often use the term clean protein. And you see that on my packaging. It just says clean protein. It doesn't say cricket protein. So I'm also looking at, other forms of clean protein like hemp protein. So we talk about clean protein as a category. This is an alternative protein source. And I think in that way, just using those more vague terms opens the door for people to look more at the packaging, and then hopefully people can view it as just another alternative instead of like a really wacky thing. It's just like, oh, you have your your soy, you have your pea, but the cricket has vitamin B12 that you don't have in soy and pea, and it's got hemoglobin, iron, and all these other things that people are really into in nutrition like about the cricket. Yeah, and I think normalization is also about getting your peers to try it. So the cricket challenge did this really well in that we friends would challenge other friends, just like the ice bucket challenge, to give it a try. And if your friends are doing it, then you're a little bit more likely to do it. So I find that when I'm doing sampling out in public, 1 and 2 are willing to try it without any peer pressure. And then once they get the peer pressure going, it becomes about 3 and 4.
Did you guys do anything to look at kind of pairing into the holistic growth that's happening from obviously a lot of people are kind of re-looking at ethical vegan and things like that, which obviously vegan doesn't include insects, but just the holistic approach to dieting and all of these different things that are going on right now. Is there anything that you could almost create like the pescatarian version of insects where people are only eating sustainably farmed, protein and things, because fish honestly isn't that sustainably farmed most of the time. So
Yeah.
just curious if you have looked at that, or if that's ever a thought to be like a new almost diet group of sorts, because we seem to name everything now.
Totally. So I'm trying to popularize the term ento. So you could be ento vegan or ento pescatarian or just ento.
Entotarian.
But yeah, if you are speaking with someone, you can be like, oh, I heard of this new diet. It's called ento. It's really good. I heard it's really delicious.
Alexandra, did you have another question?
Yeah, I was just curious, what's your favorite way to enjoy your products? If there's a specific like recipe you use it in or what?
I've been toying with this banana bread that's got me really excited right now. Because, banana bread was the recipe of 2020. But my favorite way, I make this chocolate mousse with the cricket protein. I do the chocolate cricket protein and mix it with avocado or blend it with avocado and some banana. And it becomes really light and airy. The avocado gives it this wonderful silky texture. And then sometimes I'll put a little bit of like whipped cream or not so much whipped cream. I usually do coconut cream on top and then add some berries and stuff. It's really good.
So do you experiment a lot, I guess?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I've put it in curries. It's the plain protein powder. It works really well in savory applications. So I've mixed it in hummus, and one of my favorites is to make like, I'll dump some vegetables in a pot, and then I'll dump like a jar of any Asian or any Indian curry sauce in there, and then put the cricket as the protein. I really like that too. I used to use tofu, but I try and eat less soy, so the cricket's the way to go.
Awesome. Well, once again, we want to thank you for your talk today, Sarah, and sharing all of this with everyone. And thank everyone who joined today for joining virtually. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors and the team that was able to make this happen. And again, a special thanks to Sarah for joining us and being a part of Creative Mornings. Don't forget to follow us on social media for the next few events. You can find these links popping up in the chat right now for Facebook, Instagram, and of course our website, creativemornings.com. If there's any final questions or connection points you all would like to make, feel free. But Thanks again to everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, I would just say that I love being on LinkedIn and I like chatting with people on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me.
Awesome. All right, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Okay.